What's up, YouTube? Peckin in here. A lot of you guys have been asking me for me to do post commentary on one of my Fallout 4 80% speedrun world records, and this is perfect timing because I just got the first sub 31-minute Fallout 4 80% run. So we're getting started with the run right now. And what I really want to do with this video is talk about the ways that the run has changed since the world record was 35 minutes back in 2020. If you really want to know about how the route was back then you can watch the Tomato Anus How Speedrunners Beat Fallout 4 in 35 minutes video. And this video, I'll really treat it more like a follow-up to that video where I'm going to be talking about how the run has changed since then. And the biggest change in the run is the method of armor stacking that we do, because previously the method of armor stacking was pretty slow, and what I did with help from Gata92 was find a much faster version of armor stacking glitch, so that previously we were able to do armor stacking up to 3 or 3.2 times speed multiplier. This method gets us to more of like an 8 times speed multiplier. The downside to this method is that it requires us to play on patch 1.7 or later, and the implications of that are that certain glitches that we used to have access to are now patched out. So we don't have access to vendor glitch, that's the biggest one. We can't cover slide. Flipping out of bounds is harder. And we also don't have access to Clive. Clive is patched out. And one of the implications of vendor glitch being patched out is that we actually need to put points into charisma. So it used to be that there were only two special stats that matter, endurance and agility, because those are the ones that affect sprinting. But now it turns out that there are three special stats that matter. We need to put points into endurance, charisma, and agility. So you might be wondering, why do I prioritize endurance and charisma? And I spent a lot of time going back and forth between what special stats I want to prioritize. First, the reason I want to put charisma at 10 is basically that each point I take out of charisma to put into endurance and agility. Endurance and agility affect how much you can sprint. And because we increase our speed to such a high value after we pass Good Neighbor, that means endurance and agility mostly just matter up until we get to Good Neighbor, which means that they don't matter as much as they did in previous routes. So each point I take out of charisma and put into endurance and agility saves about a second, but each point I put into charisma means that there's a certain menu glitch that I have to do. I have to do that one time fewer than not putting that point into charisma. And because that menu glitch is pretty hard, I really do want to max out charisma. And that means that I have 14 points left to split between endurance and agility. What I actually used to do is put 9 points into charisma, but now I just realized that just wasn't worth it, so I'm putting 10 points into charisma. But what's interesting about endurance and agility is because endurance and agility both affect how much you can sprint, there's actually a formula for how many points you should put into endurance and how many points you should put into agility based on how many points you can split between endurance and agility. And it turns out that if endurance plus agility equals 15, it doesn't matter how many points you put into endurance and how many points you put into agility. If the sum is greater than 15, then you want to max out endurance. And if the sum is less than 15, you want to max out agility. And the sum is 14, which is less than 15, so why am I maxing out endurance and not agility? Well, agility would be more important for sprinting, except for the fact that endurance affects our max health, and there is one point in the run where that max health actually matters, which is falling onto the Museum of Freedom. If I were to put all of those points into agility and only 4 points into endurance, then I wouldn't be able to survive the fall onto the Museum of Freedom. The only way realistically I could survive that is if I had buff out, and there's only a chance to be able to buy buff out from Daisy, and if I can't buy it from Daisy, then I would just have to reset for run. So the only way I'm consistently surviving a fall is to max out endurance, which is maybe about a second slower in terms of how much sprinting I can do than if I were to max out agility. So maybe if we were really trying to push Varan towards its limit, then we would be maxing out agility and just hoping that Daisy randomly sells buff out. But Varan isn't at that point yet. It's much easier to just max out endurance to be able to survive the fall. So that's why we go with 10 endurance, 10 charisma, and 4 agility.
N'est-ce pas?
So as I was saying, Varan is performed on 1.7 because that is required for the new stacking glitch, which we call negative stacking. This is something that Gita and I originally developed because we wanted to be able to use it in the all achievements run. The logic was that if we were going to do a really long Fallout 4 speedrun like all achievements category, then we would want to stack our movement speed up to a really high value, but we wouldn't want to use the older hexzone stacking method because that method has a ton of loading screens, and if we were going to movement stack our speed up to like an 8 times multiplier, then anyone watching it or anyone doing the run would have to sit through a whole hour of loading screens, and we didn't want that, so we wanted an alternative method. We vaguely based this on a method found by maybe 5059, and that method showed some promise, but we needed to, further develop it. It required duplication, which is why it required us to play on version 1.7 or later, but because we were able to just keep developing the glitch further and further to continually make it faster, it eventually became fast enough that it was worth just playing any percent on 1.7 and sacrificing the ability to use all of these glitches, to use Vendor Glitch, to use Clive, and to have more difficult clipping out of bounds, just to be able to use this faster armor stacking method. The whole point of playing on 1.7 is that duplication is easier on 1.7, partly because 1.7 or because 1.5 or later is required for compatibility with the Contraptions Workshop DLC, which is required for its duplication method, and also because 1.7 is just playing on 1.7 itself makes duplication faster, because you can duplicate an entire stack of items at a time instead of duplicating one item at a time. The item that we have to duplicate is the Destroyer's left leg, which is, if you remember from the 2020 to 2025 route, is one of the 2 items that boost your movement speed by 10% that we use in the old armor stacking method in the previous route. But because we're playing on 1.7, we don't have access to Vendor Glitch, so we can't buy that as easily as we used to be able to, which is why we have to use another glitch, which we call the menu slide glitch, which we're going to be using in Good Neighbor, and that allows us to just craft a lot of items repeatedly that we'll be able to sell in order to buy the Destroyer's left leg. The menu slide glitch, you're going to see me do it in Good Neighbor. What we're going to do right now is wait for a while as the Vault Pod sequence continues. One thing that you're going to see in Vault, well, one thing that you've already seen as a consequence of 1.7 is that we weren't able to do Clive. That was patched out. And that's one of the reasons that the intro sequence on 1.7 on this route is 20 seconds slower. than it was on the previous route. And what you're going to see after the Vault Pod is that clipping out of bounds, the clip that we do, is actually more difficult because of the way item collision works on this patch. So when I was running to get this run, I spent a lot of time doing runs in the no intro category. Any percent no intro is the version of any percent where instead of starting on creating your character, it starts when you exit the vault pod. So it's just like any percent without the whole first 8 minutes cut out. So I did a lot of any percent no intro runs because the first thing you do is any percent no intro is do the run through the vault to clip out of the vault, and because that is so hard on 1.7, I needed a lot of practice with it. So I did about 3,800 attempts at any percent no intro. So I got a lot of practice with the vault. And that's how I was able to get such a good time in the vault in this 80% run. Because I just had all of this practice with this worst item collision. And the other impact of playing on 1.7 is that clipping through walls is harder, which is part of why one of the other big changes in this route from 2020 is that we're going to do almost the entire run in power armor, because power armor is almost necessary on this route to do the clip into Fort Hagen, because that pipe pistol clip that we used to do on older patches is almost impossible on newer patches. And power armor allows you to do power armor clipping, which allows you to much more easily clip through the door to Fort Hagen. But the other benefit of being in power armor, I found, is that every time you fast travel in power armor, it's 1 second faster than fast traveling without power armor, because the menu animation is faster. And just being in power armor for overrun also had some unintended benefits, which you'll soon see. But yeah, now you're going to see the result of all my practice doing the vault section very many times. We're going to set up a punch warp here. As you'll remember from the Tomato Anus video, anytime you set up a punch warp indoors and then trigger it outdoors, it takes you to near Green Touch Genetics, because Green Touch Genetics is the origin point of the map, or near the origin point of the map. So we set up this punch warp indoors, and we're going to trigger it outdoors. We set it up on that rad roach. We're going to trigger it on another rad roach, and that will bring us to near the origin point of the map, which is near Green Tech Genetics, which is super nice because that's an important location in the story of the game, which we'll need to go to later, so we can just get the fast travel point. Another one of the consequences of playing on 1.7 is that this punch warp takes a lot longer to load than it did on previous patches. I did mention that this route can be done on any version of 1.7 or later. If you run this route on the latest patch, it's almost identical. You do need to make some minor adjustments, because if you punch warp out of bounds on the latest patch, the game kind of tries to force you back inbounds. And you end up going not exactly where you want to go. So if you do run this route on latest patch, you will have to make some minor adjustments. But this is the first route where it is basically possible to run on latest patch, unlike all the previous Fallout 4 80% routes. It's just that 1.7 is a little bit nicer. By the way, 1.7 is the patch that released alongside Nuka World, so about 9 months after the original release of the game. If you run on 1.7, it's just a little bit nicer in terms of where those out-of-bounds punch warps take you. Because we only put 4 points in agility, that does make the run to Good Neighbor a little bit slower. So far, the route is mostly the same as it was on the previous route, with the exception of cutting points from agility to put into charisma. I always check that radar to see if it has a pipe pistol, and in this case he did. There's like a 50-50 chance of having a pipe pistol, and if you do, that means I won't have to buy one from Daisy and Good Neighbor. I also check if he has at least 7.38 ammo. If he does, then I won't have to buy any 0.38 ammo from Daisy and Good Neighbor. And because he had both pipe pistol and 0.38 ammo, then I will have to only do the menu side glitch here 6 times instead of 7. So you'll notice that I killed that dog back there to get the dog meat, and what I'm doing here requires a bit of explanation. So if I slide the mouse to the right and press E frame perfectly, while the little indicator window is hovered over Mutt Chops, if I slide the mouse toward Mirelurk Queen Steak and press E on the same frame that I've slided into the window, the menu will glitch and it'll think that I am able to craft Mirelurk Queen Steak even though I'm not. And this will allow me to craft Mirelurk Queen Steak. And the reason why this works is because I do have the ingredients to craft Mutt Chops, which I got by killing that dog on the way to Good Neighbor. So I can just do this as many times as I want, and the whole point of increasing my charisma is so that I have to do this fewer times. I increased my charisma to 10, so I only have to do the glitch to craft Mirelurk Queen Steak 6 times. And then what I'm going to do after I craft 6 of them, by the way, by crafting 6 of them, I end up getting 12 of them because each recipe gives you 2. Just crafting the recipe for Mirelurk Queen Steak gives you 2 Mirelurk Queen Steaks. After I craft 6 recipes, what I'm going to do is position my mouse at a certain spot at the bottom of the window, and by positioning it right there, then the Mutt Chops option stays selected, and I can slide my cursor into Yaoguai Roast to be able to craft that without having the ingredients for that. Yaoguai Roast, you might know, is a super bugged item. It is intended to increase your melee damage by 10, but it actually increases your melee damage multiplier by 10, essentially giving you 10 times as much melee damage, which means that your melee attacks can one-shot most things in the game. And that is going to be how we kill the most difficult enemies in the run, specifically Kellogg and the Cursor. So I crafted a whole bunch of Mirelurk Queen Steaks, and I'm going to sell those as well as my wedding ring to buy. What I need to buy is the Destroyer's Left Leg, which is the item that gives me a speed bonus, biometric scanner, which Daisy has about a 50-50 chance of having. In this case, she did have it, so I'm able to buy it, which will save time later, since I won't need to get the biometric scanner later. That's one of the things we need for the teleporter. And we also need to buy 0.38 ammo. I equip the Destroyer's Left Leg before fast traveling to Sanctuary, so that less in-game time passes when I fast travel to Sanctuary, and that's necessary for making it to Cricket outside Diamond City before she leaves. What I'm doing here is making a save in front of the workbench, which is something that in the previous route we would do in Diamond City, and this is for gaining character control later in the memory sequence. And this is where I craft the scope on my weapon. I'm also crafting the conveyor storage, placing some items where I need them to later. And this is one of the other major route changes since 2020. So you may notice that after every loading screen in Varan, there is this 2.4 second fade-in animation where the game fades from black, and what we've noticed is that this fade-in animation has some interesting properties. For one thing, even though you can't move during this animation, you can't turn the camera, you can't draw your weapon, you can't attack, the thing you can do is pull up your Pip-Boy. And so one thing we can do is basically use this time to pull up our Pip-Boy and do any menuing in the Pip-Boy that we might otherwise have to do later, so that just doing it during the fade-in animation saves time. Some other interesting properties have to do with how it interacts with the scope. So basically, for one thing, if you aim down your scope and then load a save while your scope is aimed down, then the fade-in that follows loading that save, you'll have character control during that fade-in. You'll be able to move your character, you'll be able to attack, you'll be able to turn the camera, all of that. Another interesting thing is that if you aim down scope during a fade-in animation where you have character control, then that fade-in is just canceled. You get full visibility instantly. Another interesting thing is that if you start or stop aiming down scope at the right time, frame perfectly, as one of those fade out animations begins, as you go through a door or as you go through a loading zone, then both the fade out animation as you go into the door or loading zone is canceled, and after the loading screen, the following fade in is also canceled. So if you can nail that timing, then you both save effectively the 0.4 seconds from the fade out before Fedor and the 2.4 seconds from the fade in after Fedor. And what I recently found is the most interesting thing, which is that if another loading screen begins during a fade out, during a fade in where you have character control, then that character control gets transferred to the following fade in after the loading screen. So what this means is, for one thing, if you hit the timing and aim down scope at the same time as you go through a loading zone or a door, and then say you fast travel immediately after that door, then if you fast travel within the 2.4 second window, before the fade in ends, then your character control will be transferred to the fade in after that fast travel. So you'll still have character control and you'll still be able to save that 2.4 seconds, which would otherwise be wasted. But what it also means is if you're about to either go through a door, go through a loading zone, or fast travel, what you can do is quick save, aim down scope, quick load, and then if you either go through the door, go through the loading zone, or fast travel within the next 2.4 seconds, then that loading screen will start while you still have full character control during the fade in, which means that character control will transfer until after the next loading screen. And this is really the big reason why having power armor for Everrun is so helpful. Because when you have power armor, it's much easier to fast travel within that 2.4 second window. Which means it's much easier to basically chain this character control in these fade-ins through multiple loading screens. I hope I explained that well. Unfortunately, in this run in particular, I wasn't able to make especially good use of that because I mostly struggled with the timing. But anyway, now is where we're going to be doing duplication, and duplication is another thing I use the scope for. You're going to see some of the properties of the scope in action here. But basically, when I shoot the destroyer's left leg into the conveyor storage and then activate it on the exact frame as it goes into the conveyor storage, that's going to duplicate it. And the scope is really useful in this part of the run because it allows me to much more quickly quick load without wasting 2.4 seconds from an unskippable faded animation. So you'll see that when I miss the timing of grabbing the destroyer's left leg, which I'm going to do quite frequently, instead of just quick loading, which will cause a 2.4 second unskippable fade in, I'm going to aim down scope, quick load, and then aim down scope again to get back full visibility. And you'll see how much faster that is at me being able to reattempt it. So I'm going to duplicate the destroyer's left leg first until I have 6 of them, because I need 6 of them in order to be able to drop them and so that they stack when dropped. So I've got 3 so far. And then once I have 6 of them, because they stack when dropped, I'll be able to do a stack do, which allows me to double the entire stack. So I'm going to get them until I have 6 of them, and then double the stack of 6 until I have 24, and until I have 16. Double the stack of 6 until I have 12, and then double the stack of 12 until I have 24. That was a stack dupe. Now I have 12, and after I have 12, I'll be able to get 24. And using these 24 Destroyer's left legs, I'm going to do negative stacking. This is the most complicated thing in the run. Okay, and this is what Gita92 and I spent most of last June developing, and what we made last June was like the previous version of negative stacking, which is a little bit slower, requires more inputs. I previously used that to get the Far Harbor world record, but then I spent a while longer experimenting with the setup, finding other things, and that eventually allowed me to figure out this setup, which is much faster and also sort of allowed me to recycle the 24 destroyers left legs so I can use each of them multiple times. But basically, what negative stacking is repeated unequipping by positioning, by making sure. What I first do is a menu overlap glitch where I activate the toolbox for red toolbox, and then I activate the workbench in quick succession so that both of the toolbox and the workbench menus are on screen at the same time. And what that does is it allows me to have this lower option, this lower destroyer's left leg selected in the workbench menu, while the same thing is selected in the toolbox menu. And by repeatedly renaming the object in the workbench menu, this basically glitches out the menus and makes the game think that we're repeatedly unequipping the destroyer's left leg, and this repeatedly lowers our speed by 10%. And you might be thinking, well, why would we want to lower our speed? We want to increase our speed, right? Yes, but what happens when we lower our speed is it eventually gets negative, and the way the game's physics engine works is it basically treats having negative speed as like having the absolute value of speed. So if we continue to lower our speed, once it goes below 0, then our speed is going to start increasing again. And by just doing this repeatedly, we will eventually be able to get to a really high speed value. And the reason I'm renaming everything in this specific pattern of lowercase letters is and I figured out that this ensures that the destroyer's left legs in our inventory always stays equipped so that the glitch doesn't suddenly break, and then that would require us to exit out of the menu and reopen the menu again. So now what we're doing is we're going to perform that load warp that we previously set up on the way to Good Neighbor, and this will trigger the nuclear option quest. That's the skip that has always been at the beginning of the run. But now after triggering that load warp, you're going to see that we have the full movement speed that we got by doing the negative stacking. And we should have at least 7 times speed now. If I had done the negative stacking perfectly, I would be at a 7.9 times speed. But I think I kind of mispressed some keys during the negative stacking, and so I don't quite have 7.9 times speed. Now that we've got the nuclear option quest, now the Institute Relay targeting sequence is going to be in Surge's inventory, and we can do a couple of things outside Diamond City, and you'll see that since we ate that Yaguai roast, that means we have 10 times melee damage multiplier, so I can just one-shot Piper by doing gun bash on her. And this is the real reason why using the Yaguai roast for combat is so much nicer than what we used to do using a Fat Man, because we can just use it everywhere, including for very small time saves that we wouldn't be able to do if we were still using a Fat Man, because we wouldn't be able to have enough mini nukes. Like you could see, we just downed Piper just by doing a gun bash on her. And now we're going to shop with Cricket. Cricket basically replaces Cleo as the person we buy our weapons and frag mines from. The advantage of Cricket over Cleo is that instead of buying 10mm from her, we can buy the spray and pray from her, which actually saves significant time in the Museum of Freedom. And the way that we buy stuff for Cricket is by selling all of those Destroyers of Flags that we previously duplicated. And yeah. So just by selling them, I am able to buy frag mines, a fusion core, which I need because I'm going to be doing this run in power armor, a spray and pray, and .45 ammo. So I'm going to be doing the same punch warp that we always did throughout the history of the route, or since punch warping has been a thing pretty much. This is still one of the coolest things on the run. Havard and Jenya found this a long time ago. The reason why this is so nice is it allows you to not only punch warp onto the roof of the Museum of Freedom, it also gives you the fast travel point for Lexington, which is also an important point in the run that we need to go to do the Railroad Loyalty quest. So yeah, basically, if you set up your punch warp on that cluster of trees northwest of Vault 111 and then trigger the punch warp in the fens, then you get this weird sort of segmented punch warp that takes you kind of one chunk at a time towards the Museum of Freedom, and then it basically drops you over the roof of Museum of Freedom. This, by the way, is the reason that we needed to have 10 endurance to be able to survive the fall onto the Museum of Freedom, and we couldn't put points in agility, which otherwise would have been faster. Anyway, because we're playing on a later patch, this punch warp is going to take a lot longer in terms of loads than it used to. What's funny is because the old patch used a different stacking method that involved like 30 or 40 loading screens, and this patch involves basically no loading screens. Even though the loading screens on this later patch are so much longer, because that old stacking method is now obsolete, this route is not only faster than the old route in terms of load remove time, it's also faster than the old route in real time. I believe this route is 3 minutes faster in load remove time than the last world record set with a previous route, but it's a little over 4 minutes faster in real time. So now we got the power armor. What you might have seen me do just there, okay, a couple of things happened here. So I make a save in front of this frag mine to set up the punch warp interrupt, which is what I'm going to do to take me to Fort Hagen later. And what I do right there is fire my pipe pistol so that when I enter the power armor, I get the fast power armor entering animation. And then before entering the power armor, I jump so that as I'm about to go into the power armor, the game will think I'm in the jump animation, and that will cancel the animation of putting in the fusion core. But because my legs are broken, I don't actually jump, so you can't see it. But if I jump right before entering the power armor and then quickly flick my cursor to the right, that skips the animation of putting in the fusion core and allows me to just get the fast animation of entering the power armor. And what you saw right there at the end was basically mash down the scope to try to get the timing of basically skipping entering the Museum of Freedom. So that's a lot of things all at once. But now you're going to see how much faster the spray and pray is in Museum of Freedom compared to just having a 10mm pistol. Oh, and what I do there, I drop the fusion core and then pick it back up, and that allows me to essentially put the fusion core in my power armor without getting the long fusion core animation. Spray and pray here is really nice because I don't have to have good aim. You know, when I'm using a pistol, I need to actually aim at my opponent, but because I don't have good aim, it's just so much nicer to just not have to aim at for raiders. Anyway, this pickpocket is a 43% chance to steal, so it's a bit unlucky that it took me 4 tries. But now, because I made that save in front of Diamond City, after downing Piper, causing the gate to open, I'm now able to use that save to load warp into Diamond City. You'll also see that I aim down scope before load warping, so that I'm able to aim down scope again after loading the save, which allows me to execute the load warp faster. What I do right after entering Diamond City is I'm going to take the Water Boy perk. That's the perk that makes me immune to radiation and water. This does 2 things. First, what I attempt to do here is make an autosave by getting the Water Boy perk. But I didn't notice it at the time, but that autosave didn't actually register. And the reason why that happened is because I accidentally opened the menu a second time immediately after opening the menu of the first time. This is all standard Diamond City stuff, by the way, all stuff that was in the previous route. Set up the punch warp save for where I'm going to punch warp in memory then, and I need to open and close Nick's office to basically trigger the quest to basically skip having to save Nick once I go to Fort Hagen. But anyway, like I was saying, the reason why I actually need the Water Boy perk is because there's an upcoming punch warp that I'm going to do, and that punch warp kind of bugs out the game into thinking that I'm going to be underwater and will cause me to just continuously take radiation damage until I'm dead. And the easiest way to avoid that happening is just by taking the perk that makes us immune to radiation from water sources. So yeah, what I'm doing here in Lexington is, just as it was part of the previous any percent route, grabbing Carrington's prototype and dropping it, which advances the Railroad Loyalty quest, which I need because I need to side with one of the factions in order to build the teleporter into the Institute. Just like with the previous route, I set up a punch warp right after entering, and then use a cake pan to clip out of bounds to get to Carrington's prototype, and then trigger the punch warp to get back to the entrance. Now what I'm going to do here is run through the glowing sea. You're going to see how much faster... first you see how much faster it is to fast travel when I'm in power armor compared to just having the regular Pip-Boy. It's a full second faster, just because the menu opens up so much faster when you're in power armor compared to when you just have the Pip-Boy, and that's how I was almost instantly able to fast travel to the Boston Police rationing site, which is where I'm going to run through the glowing sea starting from, before you were able to even see where I'm fast traveling to. Before I start running, I need to use that save I set up on the roof of the Museum of Freedom to set up that punch warp, which is the punch warp that I'm going to do that takes me to Fort Hagen, and that also glitches the game to think that I'm underwater, causing me to take radiation damage, but I prevented that radiation damage by getting the Water Boy perk. So quick save, load the hard save that I made on top of the roof of Museum Freedom, set up the punch warp using the frag mine I already threw down, and then quick load. Now you're going to see how much faster the run through the glowing sea is when I have over a 7 times speed instead of just 3 times speed. One thing I previously neglected to mention, I've been carefully managing my experience points so that I can hit level 3 right there, fully restoring my AP so that I can sprint almost the whole way through the glowing sea. The reason this is necessary in the new route is because this new stacking method, unlike the previous stacking method using the hex zone, doesn't increase our endurance. So we still only have 12 endurance, 10 that we started from, plus 2 from eating one of the Mirelurk Queen steaks. So now we trigger Punch Warp, and this is a slight variation on the old Punch Warp interrupt, which by triggering the Punch Warp at a slightly different spot, and by running straight to the Punch Warp trigger spot instead of fast traveling there, this caused me to end up right in front of Fort Hagen instead of a nearby drained swimming pool, saving a bit of time on movement. Anyway, because we only have 12 endurance instead of 21, I want to carefully manage my XP so that I hit level 3 at that spot in particular so I can sprint more on the way through Glensia. This is the first of a major reason why I have power armor, because it is very hard to clip through this wall in front of Fort Hagen on this newer patch. So instead I do a power armor clip, where I slide my mouse to the left as I re-enter power armor after immediately exiting it, and that just clips me through the door. While I'm waiting in the elevator, I basically dump all of the stuff in my junk inventory. I also take this opportunity to double check that I actually got the biometric scanner, because if I didn't get it, then I'll have to take some extra time to get one later. Another thing you see me do there, you may be wondering why, when I fell in power armor, that didn't trigger the power armor landing animation. That animation loses time, so I skip that animation by drawing my weapon shortly before I land, and the animation of drawing a weapon or switching your weapon always cancels out that power armor landing animation, so I'm using this absolutely everywhere. And now you're going to see how, because I'm under the effect of the Yaguai Roast, I'm just able to one-shot Kellogg with a power attack. Now I'm going to load warp to Dick's Agency. One thing I'm proud about in this run is I was able to get both load warps first try. A load warp on a door is much more difficult to execute than a load warp in a loading zone, because instead of a 0.4 second window, you have a 1 frame window, so it's a frame perfect trick. But yeah, that's another advantage of having Free Aggro Roast, just being able to one-shot anything you want at any time by downing Nick Valentine there. I skip his line and save 4 seconds.
Vous aviez raison, Nick.
L'Institut, c'est le
Aucun Il faut que je trouve un moyen.
Ça fait plus d'un an.
C'est Kellogg. Joli chapeau. De toute façon.
Ouais.
Il n'en...
Qu'est-ce
Il y a un endroit. J'espère que vous ne vous trompez pas, Nick.
Voyons. Non, mais
En fait, je crois que j'ai déjà...
on se lance dans...
Bien. Je n'ai pas besoin de compagnie.
D'accord. On se retrouve à l'antre.
So we basically just skipped like the first 1/3 of the run, 1/3 of the game, just by going into Valentine's Detective Agency early and then stepping out of bounds into Fort Hagen, and that just skipped having to go through Park Street Station and meeting Nick. I'm attempting to do a lot of mashing scope as I enter a door in order to skip the fade-in that follows the loading screen. In this run, I didn't get it very frequently. It's frame perfect, but it doesn't have a very good visual cue, so most of what you see me doing is just kind of mash down scope in hope that one of the times I mash down scope, it'll hit the window. I want to exit my power armor. First, I need to exit my power armor here because I can't entering the memory sequence while I'm in power armor, so But I want to exit my power armor at a specific spot because by placing the power armor right there, I am able to activate it at a certain time as I exit the memory scene to skip a short animation and save a few more seconds.
On ne peut pas accéder aux souvenirs de cet implant. Ils sont...
Dites-moi que vous avez...
Laissez-moi réfléchir.
Hein?
On va...
D'accord.
Asseyez-vous là.
Bon, eh bien, rendez.
Là, ça va chier.
And another one of the big changes in this route you're seeing right now is that Amari Skip is back. Amari Skip is what you saw me do just now, attacking Amari, waiting until Nick attacks Amari, and then downing Amari, and then entering the memory pod. And if you do it correctly, then that skips the entire dialogue where Amari has to talk to you for like 20 seconds before the memory sequence actually begins. Now you're going to see me do two things. First, set up the punch work that I need to set up to get to the end of the memories, and also load that save I made back in Sanctuary so that I can activate the workbench and quick load to get character control during the memories. The reason I was able to do that in this route and not the previous route is because I didn't make certain friendly NPCs aggressive to me. So, like in the previous route, you would shoot Sturges 4 times, and that will cause him to attack you, and then when you put away his weapon, he forgives you, and that allows you to pickpocket the Institute Relay targeting sequence. But in this route, because you just one-shot him with a melee attack, he never gets aggressive to you, and because of the AI behavior in this game, that allows you to do Amari Skip, which was a thing in previous routes, and like older routes, but we weren't able to do in like the 35-minute route, but because we're able to one-shot Sturges, we're able to bring that back. Also, what you may have noticed after I did Punch Warp in Memories is my AP ran out really quickly. So the reason why that happened is a little interesting, because if you watch my previous runs on this route, you'll notice that before I did the negative stacking, I used the Armor Workbench to remove the custom fitted mod from the Destroyer's left leg. I didn't do that in this run because I realized I didn't need to, because now that I'm in the power armor for the entire run, the power armor makes that unnecessary, because when I negative stack, I'm basically repeatedly unequipping the same item over and over. And if that thing has the custom fitted mod, a mod that reduces the amount of AP you use by sprinting, by negative stacking with that, you would repeatedly increase the AP used by sprinting. And normally that would make it so that sprinting completely drains your AP in like 1 second. However, when you're in power armor, the calculation for AP draining while sprinting is completely different, and since I'm going to be in power armor pretty much the whole run, that is no longer necessary. Also, just having Viagwai Roast in this part of the run allowed me to save time by one-shotting the Courser with the baton, and that allowed me to skip through memories a little bit faster by downing him at the right times. Also, this is why I place that power armor right in front of the memory launcher in this spot, just by interacting with it as I get up. Allows me to cancel the animation of getting up out of the memory lounger, saving the time it has to do to take that animation. And then I one-shot Amari with the baton, allowing the game to think I'm in combat, so I can get back into the power armor more quickly. This is Punch Warp that was also in the previous routes that allows me to Punch Warp to the correct spot in Green Tech Genetics. What I'm attempting to do right now is fast travel to the Crater of Adam within that 2.4 seconds where character control within a fade-in is preserved. I did hit it within the 2.4 seconds, but apparently because I missed the fade and skip on Vidor in the first place, I never got that character control in the first place, and so I wasn't able to get character control after fast traveling. Another minor time save, I just steal an item behind Virgil to skip his first line, because that first line is otherwise unskippable and just wastes like 5 seconds.
Attendez, quoi? Vous n'admettez qu'est-ce... Oh... C'est vrai. Très bien. Si je vous ai...
You're seeing I'm aiming down scope to skip every one of my lines after I save them. It's usually pretty ambiguous whether this saves time or not, because even though you skip your own line, it makes his following line longer. So it's pretty hard to tell in most cases whether it saves time, but we did conclude that in some cases, at least, it saves time. So generally, it's better to just do it every time, in case you might just save some time here and there. This is definitely an area where we can do more research in to see how much time that's actually saving and where it actually matters whether we do it or not. But yeah, now that we've talked to Virgil, we can continue the quest in Green Tech Genetics. Accidentally did power attack here instead of because it didn't hold C long enough. Green Tech is pretty much the same as it is in every previous route. Doing the punch warps at the same spots. Only difference is instead of killing the courser with Fat Man, I kill him with security baton under the effect of the Yagwai Rose. These punch warps are also one of the things that are slightly different on latest patch. If you do this run on latest patch, that second punch warp won't quite take you to where you need to go, so you would need to adjust it a little bit. Anyway, I load one save that both allows me to trigger a punch warp that will take me to the lower part of Railroad HQ, and the load warp out of Green Tech Genetics. Another one of changes since the old route is that I first go to the Railroad HQ at the same time as I return the Courser chip into them. So I just go to the Railroad HQ for the first time after the Courser chip. We used to think that was slower, then we did more testing, and now we realize it's faster. You may notice that I fast traveled to Mass Fusion, where when we were going to the railroad, we used to fast travel to the Old North Church. The thing is, because I needed to hit that level up at level 3, I actually needed to avoid getting the fast travel point for Old North Church, as if I were to get that fast travel point, it would give me too much XP to hit level 3 in time. So that's why instead I had to fast travel to Mass Fusion.
Vous n'avez pas ménagé votre... Qui êtes... Si c'est vrai, vous n'avez... Il est... Je vois. Dernière question.
That point right there, as I entered the Old North Church, was, I think, the only time in Varan I was actually able to get the timing on the scope fade and skip, where I just mash down scope as I go through a door.
Une centaine. Visiblement, vous êtes donc des... Oui, je trouve que ça vous va plutôt.
And thanks to that, I was able to gold this segment. And this punch warp is one of the last things in the new route. I'm going to bypass the time where Desdemona would otherwise be introducing me to the whole railroad just by, doing this punch warp, by setting up this punch warp. Yeah, I'm going to trigger it later, right after I enter the Institute.
Vous avez décroché. Donnez la puce. Voyons ce qu'il y a dessus.
Tenez.
À toi de jouer, Tom.
Because I kind of entered and exited the railroad HQ in a particular way. I don't know how to describe it. That made it so that Desdemona's sequence, where she kind of introduces me to the whole railroad, overlaps with when we're giving the cursor chip to Tom, so that basically skips that whole section. Which is faster than just fast traveling away and back.
J'espère. Vous savez ce qu'est un synthétique, pas vrai?
Ouais.
Bien. L'Institut les considère.
I need to go through this dialogue with Desdemona as part of entering the Railroad HQ after getting the Courser chip, because this ensures that she'll actually follow us to Sanctuary when we're building the teleporter.
Je me demandais si je vous reverrais un jour. J'aurais dû m'en douter. Comment? D'accord, je n'insiste pas. Moi, et pour vous savez tout, je tiens. Attention, je le vous garantis. Mais tant mieux, parce que n'oubliez pas notre.
Vous avez besoin de quelque chose. C'était donc pour ça la pub.
L'Institut.
Ça fait des années qu'on essaie. Comment ce...
Excusez-moi.
Alors, vous allez me donner ces plans?
All of this is pretty similar to Old Route. Only differences are that because I'm in Power Armor, I'm able to save time on every fast travel since the animation is slower. I'm also doing somewhat more shooting NPCs to skip their dialogue, which I'm able to do because shooting them doesn't cause them to attack me, because I didn't shoot other NPCs to attack that, which causing them to attack me previously, like the previous route did with Sturges. Basically, shooting NPCs, if you shoot NPCs and that causes them to attack you, sometimes that's useful, but sometimes that causes problems in the future, and because I didn't do that with Sturges and this route, that means I'm able to save time shooting NPCs like Desdemona and Tinker Tom to skip their dialogue. Building the teleporter, again, is basically the same as it was in the previous route. We used the military-grade circuit board that I got in Fort Hagen, and the biometric scanner that I bought from Daisy, though there's a 50-50 chance of her selling the biometric scanner, so if you hadn't sold it, then I would have had to get it on the way through the Glowing Sea.
Si votre Tom a préparé un message codé à la... Ah, c'est dans vos... Vous y arriverez. Je vous fais confiance. Mon...
Lance la séquence de détection. Cette fréquence ne marchera qu'une fois.
So what I tried to do there is fast travel away at the right time as I was landing on the teleporter, but because I fast traveled away slightly too late, then I missed the window to do that, because that's a little bit harder to execute while you're on Power Armor. So I did the backup instead, where I just made a quick save after I lost character control and used that to load warp out. This is the point where I realized that when I tried to make an autosave as I first went through Diamond City, that autosave didn't register. So I just made a mental note of that I would have to pay attention to that and the rest of the run. And this is the point where in the old route, we would previously trigger a punch warp to go down to the lower floor of the Institute so that we could set up a punch warp at the Advanced Systems Store. But now, because we set up a punch warp at the better spot, we're able to punch warp directly out of bounds, and then we can do a bit of out-of-bounds movement backwards to the Advanced Systems Store. This is another slight issue with doing this route on latest patch. If we were to do this punch warp on latest patch, then the game would try to push us more in bounds, and then we wouldn't be able to do the out-of-bounds movement toward the Advanced Systems Store. This is the one point in the run where I do the thing that I described when we were first making the scope. Basically, I quick save and then aim down scope and then quick load, and this puts me in a fade in where I have character control so that after I go through this door, um, then I have full character control during the fade in and can just aim down scope to get back my visibility. The reason I don't do this more often is it's just kind of finicky in a lot of ways, because sometimes after you quick load while you aim down scope, the fade in only lasts for less than it's for shorter than it's supposed to. Sometimes you don't even get character control during the fade in if you did it incorrectly, which means that you would just lose 2.4 seconds or longer. And sometimes during the fade in, you're not really able to navigate to the door where you're supposed to in time. And in that case, then you don't save any time. And in some cases, it's better to just try to go for mashing down the scope and hit it at the right time just to get through the door. In theory, this is more consistent, but maybe I'll go for it more once I have practice with it. The nice thing about just trying to mash down the scope as you go through the door is that it's completely risk-free. Like, if you miss it, you don't get the fade and skip, but you also don't lose any time. You also saw that I switched to the pipe pistol right there, which completely canceled the animation of landing in my power armor. I'll warp out after putting down the fusion pulse shards. We're getting into the end game now. You see I'm on a very good pace. Easily 33x, 34x pace. I'm going to make one more small mistake in this run. Right here. Or not right here, but coming up. Basically, first I kind of misfit fast travel and fast travel to the incorrect spot before I realized I needed to fast travel to Railroad HQ. And somehow, when I set up that punch warp, somehow the punch warp didn't set up correctly. I'm still not sure, looking back at the footage, how that happened. But while I'm doing this run, I'm thinking that that punch warp set up correctly, and I'll be able to trigger it later. So after I fast travel and talk to Tom, I can load warp into Institute Advanced Systems using the save I made previously. This is the second frame perfect load warp in Varan. This one, once again, I'm able to get first try. And then right after load warping through the door, I attempt to trigger the punch warp that I didn't realize at the time, but never actually got set up properly. This causes me to just VATS attack the frag mine. Luckily, I realized that. So instead, I would just quick save, load a different save to set up another punch warp, and then quick load. And now I actually have an out-of-bounds punch warp set up. That puts me out of bounds, and so I load in at the default point of the cell, which is at the Institute Relay. Now, as soon as I do button press on nuclear option, I'm able to finish the game. Once again, I'd like to repeat, if you didn't understand a lot of this, I would recommend watching Tomato Witness's video, How Speedrunners Beat Fallout 4 in 35 minutes. This commentary version was really more intended to be an update on how the run has changed from 2020 to 2026. Run officially ends when our HUD disappears and right before the end cinematic plays. That's the end of the run. This is retimed to 30 minutes 43.11 seconds. So I'm going to keep doing attempts for sub 30. I will stream my attempts to both Twitch and YouTube, hopefully. If I'm able to get that working. Otherwise, I'll just stream to Twitch. So my Twitch will be linked in the description. There is a lot of potential time save in this run. Because I have gotten a 22:35 in the no intro category, which equates to like a 30-minute, 10-second full game run. So if I'm able to get a no intro run 10 seconds faster than that, or more than 10 seconds as part of a full game run, then that equates to a sub 30. So I'm super excited for how this category is developing.
It was the one I found myself in.
I'm gonna keep pushing for sub 30. I hope you all enjoyed watching. This is my first time doing a commentary video like this, but so many of you asked, I just felt like I just had to. So let me know if you want to see more videos like this. Love to do it. But thanks for watching. See ya.